Most enforcers retire and disappear into the background of a sport that used them up. George Parros retired after 2 concussions in the same season, and the league offered him a promotion. Not a desk job buried in operations, not a scouting role nobody would notice. They gave him the department that decides who gets punished for the kind of hits he used to throw.
Parros racked up more than 1,000 penalty minutes in his 9-year career. He fought a lot. Is a retired tough guy the right person here, Tim? Is he the right person to handle the lead of the Department of Player Safety? Yes or no?
The biography starts in the last place you'd go looking for an NHL enforcer, Princeton University, where Parros played 4 seasons of college hockey, captained the team as a senior, and graduated in 2003 with a degree in economics. His senior thesis was about the West Coast longshoremen's labor disputes, and he titled it Trouble on the Docks, which tells you something about the way his mind worked before anyone paid him to throw a punch. In 2010, the Sporting News published their ranking of the 20 smartest athletes in professional sports, and Parros came in 4th, sitting on the same list as Rhodes Scholars and Ivy League valedictorians. Except he happened to earn his living by fighting grown men on ice, while 25 pounds of equipment tried to hold him together. That's the part of the story the NHL loved telling when it was time to explain why they gave him the job. Princeton, economics, thesis on labor relations. They painted a picture of a thoughtful, educated man who just happened to play a physical role, as if his intelligence erased the nature of what the role actually was. But here's the other side of that same biography, the one they mentioned less often. Parros played 474 games in the NHL across 9 seasons, and in those 474 games, he accumulated 1,092 penalty minutes and 36 points. If those numbers feel lopsided, they should, because the math tells you exactly what kind of player he was. He averaged under 6 minutes of ice time per game. And if you know anything about how coaches distribute minutes, you know that 6 minutes means you're not being deployed to generate offense or kill penalties or defend a lead. You're being sent out to do one thing, and that thing is to fight whoever needs fighting, take the 5-minute major, sit in the box, and wait until your coach needs you to do it again. He played for the Kings, the Avalanche, the Ducks, the Panthers, and the Canadiens. And the job description never changed no matter what sweater he wore. Drop the gloves, protect your teammates, absorb whatever comes back at you, and do it all without crossing the line into a suspension. That last part mattered to him, and it became the centerpiece of his argument for why he belonged in the Department of Player Safety. When the NHL announced his appointment in September 2017, Parros told reporters his credentials in his own words. He said he played the game as physically as anybody, and he never once was fined or suspended, and he knew where that line was. That quote showed up in every article about the hiring, because the league wanted it to. It was the entire case for why a man with over 1,000 penalty minutes deserved to sit in judgment of how other players behaved. A Princeton economist who spent the better part of a decade taking the hits nobody else on the roster was willing to take, and when the hits finally stopped, the league looked at the wreckage and called it a resume. The question nobody in the front office seemed interested in answering was what it actually cost him to play that role for 9 years, and what it costs every enforcer who does the same. Because the answer to that question puts the league's entire argument for hiring him on trial. What Parros went through in his final season tells you everything you need to know about the gap between never suspended and never hurt, because those two phrases describe completely different realities, and the NHL has always preferred the first one. On October 1st, 2013, the Montreal Canadiens opened their season at home against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and Parros fought Colton Orr in the 3rd period. It was their second fight of the game, because that was the rhythm of the enforcer's life. You didn't fight once and sit down, you fought until the situation was settled. During the second bout, Orr slipped and pulled Parros down with him, and Parros went face first into the ice at full speed. He was knocked out cold. Trainers rushed over, tried to get him up, watched him get to one knee and collapse again, and then the stretcher came out. He was carried off the ice in front of a home crowd that had come to watch the first game of a new season, and every camera in the building was on him while it happened. The concussion kept him out for 12 games. He came back because that's what enforcers did. And on December 14th of the same year, he fought Eric Bolton in a game against the New York Islanders. He suffered a second concussion. 2 significant brain injuries separated by fewer than 3 months. He played only 22 games that entire season. The Canadiens didn't offer him another contract when the year ended. And after a few months as an unrestricted free agent with no takers, he announced his retirement in December 2014. The sport had used him for what it needed and moved on the moment his body couldn't keep up with the demands anymore, which is not a tragedy unique to George Parros, but is the standard operating procedure for every enforcer who's ever laced up. Now, here is where the story turns, because the NHL's argument for putting Parros in charge of player safety depended entirely on the idea that he played the game the right way, that he walked the line, that his record was clean. And his record was clean, by the league's own definition of clean, which only measured whether the league itself had ever penalized him beyond the standard 5-minute fighting major. But the league's definition of clean didn't account for what his body absorbed. It didn't count the concussions. It didn't count the accumulated damage from 9 years of bare-knuckle fights on a sheet of ice. Never suspended is a statement about what the league chose to do. Never hurt would have been a statement about what actually happened. And nobody was making that claim because nobody could. By the 2016-17 season, the year before Parros was promoted to run the department, the NHL's own tracking showed 791 slashing minors across the league. The Department of Player Safety had been in existence since 2011 and had already cycled through 2 heads before Parros sat down in the chair. He wasn't walking into an empty room with a blank whiteboard and the freedom to build something new. He was inheriting a department that had 6 years of precedent baked into it. 6 years of decisions about what counted as dangerous and what didn't. 6 years of the league defining its own tolerance for violence and then hiring people who shared that tolerance to enforce it. The question that kept circling back, even among people who respected Parros personally, was a simple one. If the department already had 6 years of precedent and 3 heads before him, and all 3 of those heads were former enforcers or physical players, why did the league keep reaching into the same pool? And the answer to that question tells you everything you need to know about what the league actually wanted the department to do. Nobody is saying George Parros is too stupid for the job. The problem is bigger than him, because the Department of Player Safety was never built to do what its name promises. And the people the league keeps putting in charge of it are the proof. Since the NHL created the department in 2011, 3 men have run it. Brendan Shanahan came first, a Hall of Famer and one of the most physical forwards in the history of the sport, with 2,489 career penalty minutes and roughly 90 career fights depending on which database you trust. Stefan Quintal came second, a 16-year defenseman with 1,320 penalty minutes and his own long list of bouts. Add those careers together and the combined numbers are staggering. 4,901 penalty minutes between the 3 of them, and 378 fights. Those are not the resumes of 3 separate individuals who happen to land the same job through different paths. That's a pattern, and the pattern tells you what the league values when it fills this chair. They want someone who played the game at its most violent edge and understands that culture from the inside. Someone who won't push back too hard against a league that still profits from the version of hockey where fists fly and bodies crash into the boards. When Parros got the appointment, the Hockey News said what a lot of people in the sport were already thinking. The publication argued that it didn't much matter who ran the department, because nothing was going to change until the people surrounding the position stopped pushing it to favor violence. That's not a shot at Parros. That's a shot at the system that keeps hiring the same kind of person and expecting different results. You can swap out the person in the chair every 3 years, and plenty of fans and journalists will spend a news cycle debating whether the new hire is smart enough or tough enough or fair enough. But none of that matters if the chair itself was designed to produce a specific outcome regardless of who's sitting in it. Gary Bettman announced the Parros hire with the kind of language commissioners use when they want a decision to sound inevitable. He called Parros one of the brightest and most innovative young minds in the game. And every outlet ran the quote because it was the commissioner of the NHL publicly vouching for a man whose career was defined by fighting. The same league that employed Bettman had spent years arguing in courtrooms and press conferences that fighting was a controlled part of the sport and that nobody really gets hurt doing it. And now they were handing the safety portfolio to a man who had been carried off the ice on a stretcher fewer than 4 years earlier. The contradiction is the point. The league doesn't see it as a contradiction because the league has always treated toughness and safety as two sides of the same coin, as if the man who threw the punches is naturally the best person to decide when punching goes too far. That logic only works if you accept the premise that the department's job is to manage violence rather than reduce it. And if you look at the exposed record, managing violence is exactly what the department has done. The test case arrived on May 3rd, 2021, and it played out exactly the way the department's critics had been warning about for years. Tom Wilson of the Washington Capitals was in a scrum during a game against the New York Rangers when he pinned Pavel Buchnevich face down on the ice and punched him in the back of the head. That alone would have been enough to warrant review. But what happened next made it worse. Artemi Panarin, one of the Rangers' best players, jumped in to defend a teammate, and Wilson pulled off his helmet, grabbed him by the hair, and threw him to the ice. When Panarin tried to get up, Wilson threw him down again. Panarin suffered a lower body injury that ended his season with 3 games remaining. Parros' department reviewed the footage and issued its ruling. Wilson received a $5,000 fine, the maximum amount permitted under the collective bargaining agreement for the punch on Buchnevich. There was no suspension. There was no discipline at all for what Wilson did to Panarin. The league looked at a sequence where a star player was thrown to the ice by his hair without a helmet on and decided that a fine smaller than what most NHL players spend on a single road trip dinner was enough. The Rangers responded with a public statement that went further than any team had gone before. They called the decision a dereliction of duty and said Parros was unfit to continue in his role. The statement was reportedly commissioned by owner James Dolan himself and named Parros directly, which teams in the NHL simply do not do when they disagree with league executives. The normal protocol is to grumble privately, accept the ruling, and move on. The Rangers broke that protocol completely. The NHL's response came fast. The league fined the Rangers $250,000 for the statement, which was 50 times the amount Wilson had been fined for the conduct that started the entire controversy. Commissioner Bettman said the extent to which the Rangers expressed their disagreement was unacceptable, and that it was terribly unfair to question Parros' professionalism. The fine was unprecedented for a public statement criticizing a league executive. Think about what that sequence tells you about where the power sits. A player injures a star, and the punishment is $5,000. A team publicly criticizes the man who decided that $5,000 was enough, and the punishment is $250,000. The department exists to hand down rulings. The fine structure exists to make sure nobody challenges them. The system protects itself before it protects the players inside it, and the Panarin incident put that machinery on display in a way the league could not walk back. And then the reporting from The Athletic made it even worse. According to Rick Carpinello, Parros had not even wanted to suspend Wilson for the earlier hit on Brandon Carlo of the Boston Bruins, a hit that sent Carlo to the hospital with a concussion, mood changes, and blurry vision. Bettman reportedly didn't like the optics of letting that one go and ordered a 7-game suspension himself. The head of the Department of Player Safety was not always making the calls. The calls at least in that instance, were being made above him by the same commissioner who had praised his appointment as a stroke of brilliance. And that's the part that should bother you the most. Even when the department does act, it doesn't always act because the head of the department believed action was warranted. Sometimes it acts because the league's public image requires it, and the person in the chair is overruled by the person who put him there. The department doesn't drive the bus. It sits in the passenger seat. The question was never whether George Parros was smart enough for the job. The Princeton degree is real. The economics thesis is real. The problem is the job itself, what it was built to do, who it was built to protect, and why the league keeps filling the chair with the same type of man. He was on a stretcher in 2013. He was signing suspensions in 2017. The NHL called that a qualification. The department is still in his hands, and the calls he makes are still getting overruled from above when the optics demand it. There's more to this story than one department and one decision. If you want to keep going down this road, the calls, the politics, the players the league decided weren't worth protecting, that's exactly what Healthy Scratch is for. Early access every time. And right now, every member gets our brand new ebook for free.